You know what gets me every single year? Watching gardeners keep expanding their gardens, adding more beds and working longer hours, yet somehow harvesting less food than they expected from all that space. For years, I thought bigger harvests required a bigger garden. I kept adding more plants, more rows, and more growing space, and while it worked okay, the harvests never seemed to justify the extra work. Then I started studying Amish gardens in Pennsylvania and Ohio, and I noticed something that didn't make sense. Some families were harvesting basket after basket of vegetables from gardens that looked smaller than the average suburban backyard. One Amish gardener was growing enough tomatoes, beans, lettuce, onions, and carrots from a modest plot to fill multiple cellar shelves for winter storage. And what surprised me most wasn't what they were growing. It was the one planting habit they followed before a single seed ever touched the soil. I'm standing there looking at neat rows packed with healthy vegetables, basket after basket of produce coming out of a relatively small area, and I'm thinking, how are they harvesting close to 100 pounds of vegetables from a backyard this size when most gardeners struggle to get half that? Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what they do and how you can apply the same small space gardening system to dramatically increase production without expanding your garden. Stick around because the planning principle I'll show you near the end is responsible for one of the biggest differences between a 40-pound garden and a 100-pound garden, and most backyard gardeners unknowingly skip it every season. A simple decision that can make the difference between an average harvest and a backyard that produces food all season long. In Amish communities, there's a guiding principle of stewardship, the idea that the resources you've been given should be cared for, improved, and used wisely rather than wasted. It's a simple philosophy, but it's one that shapes the way Amish families approach farming and gardening. Now, I'm not here to preach religion, but here's why this matters for your garden. When you constantly expand your garden every time you want a bigger harvest, you're often treating space as the solution instead of productivity. You end up creating more work, more maintenance, and more opportunities for problems, rather than getting more food from the space you already have. The Amish learned this through generations of observation, and what modern agricultural research continues to confirm is that garden productivity isn't determined primarily by size. It's determined by factors like soil quality, plant spacing, succession planting, and efficient use of resources. Well-managed small gardens frequently outperform larger gardens on a per square foot basis. Here's something many Amish gardeners understood long before soil science became popular. Healthy soil isn't just dirt. A single teaspoon of productive garden soil can contain billions of microorganisms, helping plants access nutrients. That's one reason Amish gardens often look unusually vigorous even without expensive inputs. And in a moment, I'll show you how this soil-first mindset directly affects harvest weight. Healthy soil supports billions of microorganisms, beneficial fungi and bacteria that help plants access nutrients and water more efficiently. When crops are spaced intentionally and soil biology is protected, plants spend less energy competing and more energy producing food. The result is stronger growth, higher yields, and more vegetables harvested from the same amount of space. That's Amish thinking applied to gardening. Amish gardeners don't have access to some secret technology that the rest of us don't. They're simply choosing to maximize productivity from every square foot instead of automatically expanding whenever they want bigger harvests. That shift in thinking changed everything for me. Instead of asking, how can I make my garden bigger? I started asking, how can I make every square foot produce more? And that single question can completely transform the results you get from even the smallest backyard. Here's step one. And this is where the Amish approach really starts to look different from conventional backyard gardening. Of us start gardening by planting whatever crops we want wherever there's room. But here's what we're actually doing: creating inefficient use of space, leaving gaps in production, and dedicating valuable square footage to low-yield crops. The Amish approach handles this differently by treating every square foot as a productive asset that needs to earn its place. Many Amish gardeners begin planting during winter while snow is still on the ground. Before planting season arrives, they already know where every tomato, bean, carrot, cabbage, and lettuce planting will go. That planning removes wasted space before the season even starts, before a single seed goes into the ground. Assign your highest yield crops to the sunniest locations early in spring before planting begins. Crops based on mature size, making sure plants are spaced so mature leaves will nearly touch without heavily shading neighboring crops. Close-up of a garden sketch being drawn on paper. Overhead shot of a small backyard divided into growing zones. Side-by-side comparison of a randomly planted garden versus a planned garden layout. Now, here's where most people go wrong. They plant based on what they want to grow instead of what produces the most food per square foot. If you dedicate large sections of your garden to low-producing crops, you end up harvesting less food overall. Instead, prioritize crops that deliver the greatest return from limited space. For example, a single indeterminate tomato plant grown vertically can often produce 15 to 30 pounds of tomatoes over a season under good conditions. Pole beans can continue producing for weeks while using very little ground space. Leaf lettuce can be harvested multiple times from the same planting. Compare that with crops that occupy large amounts of garden space while contributing relatively little harvest weight. Amish gardeners consistently favor crops that provide the biggest food return from limited space. Know this is working when every section of the garden has a clear purpose. There are very few empty gaps between crops, and you can look at your layout and immediately see how each square foot contributes to your harvest. To recap, measure your space first, divide it into zones, assign crops according to productivity and sunlight, and make sure every square foot has a planned purpose. That's established. You move to step 2, where the Amish focus on the real engine behind high yields, building soil that can support intensive production year after year. Let me share some patterns I've noticed over the years. The 5 Amish habits that change everything now. Before we go any further, let me show you 5 patterns I kept noticing in highly productive Amish gardens. None of them seem revolutionary by themselves. In fact, most gardeners overlook them because each one feels too simple to matter. But when you stack all 5 together, that's when harvesting 100 pounds of vegetables from a small backyard starts becoming realistic. And the first one surprised me the most. Habit 1. They improved the system before EXP&DNG. I remember seeing an Amish garden that couldn't have been much larger than a suburban backyard. What stood out wasn't the size. It was how intensely productive every square foot seemed to be. There were no neglected corners, no half-empty beds, no areas waiting to be used someday. Everything had a purpose. Most gardeners respond to disappointing harvests by adding another raised bed, another row, another section of garden. The Amish approach is different. Before expanding, they ask, how can this space produce more? That single question changes everything. Because more space usually creates more watering, more weeding, and more maintenance. Better systems create more food. And in a moment, you'll see how one Amish habit allows the same piece of ground to produce multiple harvests in a single season. Habit 2. They prioritize productivity. One Amish gardener explained that every crop has to earn its place. That stuck with me. Most of us plant based on what sounds fun to grow. The Amish often think about food value, storage value, and production value. For example, a vertically grown tomato plant can produce 15 to 30 pounds of tomatoes. Pole beans can keep producing for weeks. Leaf lettuce can provide multiple harvests from the same area. The goal isn't growing the most varieties. The goal is producing the most food. And that mindset leads directly into the next habit. Habit 3. They hate empty soil. This might be the biggest difference of all. I once watched an Amish family harvest an entire section of spring lettuce. What happened next surprised me. The bed didn't stay empty. It didn't sit unused for 2 weeks. It didn't wait until next season. Within hours, that same space was being prepared for the next crop. Here's a real-world example. One Amish-style garden plan I studied used roughly 200 square feet of growing space. In early spring, lettuce and spinach occupied several beds. As soon as those crops were harvested, the same space was replanted with beans and summer vegetables. Later in the season, fall greens replaced those crops. The same ground produced food 3 separate times during a single season. Combined with vertically grown tomatoes, productive bean plantings, root crops, and intensive spacing, the total harvest weight exceeded what many gardeners harvest from gardens twice the size. That's succession planting, and it's one of the reasons small Amish gardens often outperform much larger gardens. Every day a bed sits empty is a day sunlight isn't producing food. That's why later we'll calculate how this habit alone can dramatically increase total harvest weight. Habit 4. Build soil like an investment. Most gardeners focus on what they can see above ground. Amish gardeners often focus just as much on what they can't see: compost, organic matter, mulch, manure. Cover crops, season after season, year after year. They're constantly investing in the soil. Because healthy soil grows healthier plants produce larger harvests, and larger harvests make intensive gardening possible, which leads directly to the final habit, habit 5. They think in systems. This may be the real Amish advantage. Most gardeners solve problems individually. A pest appears, treat the pest. A plant struggles, focus on the plant. The Amish approach is different. They think about the entire system: soil, spacing, crop rotation, sunlight, timing, succession planting. Everything works together. And when all 5 habits combine, something remarkable happens. The harvest becomes far greater than any one technique could produce on its own. At this point, you may be wondering whether 100 pounds is actually realistic. The answer is yes, but only when multiple productivity systems are stacked together. No single crop gets you there. No single trick gets you there. The Amish approach combines spacing, soil improvement, succession planting, crop selection, and long-term planning into one integrated system. And when those systems start working together, something remarkable happens. Let's look at what that can actually produce over the course of a growing season. Which brings us to the question you've probably been wondering since the beginning. Can a tiny backyard really produce 100 pounds of vegetables? Let's look at the numbers. Before I understood the principles behind Amish gardening systems, I thought bigger harvests required bigger gardens. I was constantly looking for extra space, adding new beds whenever possible, and still feeling like my harvests didn't match the amount of work I was putting in. Some sections produced well, others underperformed, and valuable growing space often sat empty between crops. On one side, a traditional backyard garden with wide spacing, empty patches of soil, and crops scattered throughout the garden. On the other side, a carefully planned small space garden using intensive spacing, succession planting, healthy soil, and high-yield crop selection. Watch the same amount of space over an entire growing season. Instead of producing one harvest and sitting empty, the garden continues cycling through productive crops month after month. Now, instead of measuring success by the size of the garden, I measure success by production per square foot. A well-planned small space garden can produce astonishing amounts of food from a surprisingly small area. Every section has a purpose, every planting has a schedule, and every square foot is working toward the harvest goal. Here's the progression. Week 1-2 seeds germinate and transplants establish. Soil remains evenly moist thanks to mulching. Growth appears more uniform across the garden. Month 1 plants begin filling their assigned spaces. Leaf canopies start closing gaps between crops. Succession crops are already planned for upcoming openings. Month 3 harvest baskets begin filling. The garden appears fuller and more productive than a conventional layout. Multiple crops may be producing simultaneously. Year 1 total harvest weight becomes obvious. Soil quality improves rather than declines. The garden operates as a system instead of a collection of individual plants. Let's put some realistic numbers on this. Imagine 4 healthy indeterminate tomato plants producing 20 pounds each over a growing season. That's already 80 pounds. Now add succession planted lettuce harvested multiple times. Add productive pole beans growing vertically. Add carrots, onions, spinach, kale, and other high-yield crops cycling through available space. Suddenly crossing the 100-pound mark becomes much easier to understand. The harvest isn't coming from one miracle crop. It's coming from dozens of small productivity gains stacked together throughout the season. That's exactly how highly productive Amish gardens generate so much food from relatively small spaces. A productive planting of beans, lettuce, carrots, and other high-yield crops can contribute significant harvest weight from surprisingly small areas. When you combine vertical growing, succession planting, healthy soil, and strategic crop selection, reaching 100 pounds of vegetables from a tiny backyard starts to look much more realistic. The key isn't one super crop. It's stacking multiple productive systems together throughout the season. My best results have always come from gardens where every square foot had a purpose. The highly productive Amish gardeners I've studied often achieve even better results because they're applying these principles consistently year after year. Their advantage isn't a secret fertilizer or special seed. It's decades of disciplined system building and soil improvement. Now, let's set realistic expectations. Don't expect to harvest 100 pounds of vegetables from a tiny backyard overnight. A realistic first-year goal is to improve productivity, reduce wasted space, and increase harvests compared to what you're getting now. As your soil improves, your planning becomes more precise, and your succession planting gets better. Those harvest numbers continue climbing. I'd rather you focus on building the system correctly and be pleasantly surprised by the results than chase unrealistic numbers and get discouraged. And now we arrive at the Amish planning principle I mentioned at the beginning of this video. Amish gardeners don't plan for planting day. They plan for harvest day. Every crop is chosen based on what it contributes to the season's total production. Every planting creates an opportunity for another planting. Every square foot has a purpose, and every season builds on the one before it. That's why some Amish gardens seem to produce far more food than their size would suggest. They're not managing plants. They're managing a harvest system. It's not a magic trick, a special variety, or a hidden technique. It's a system that compounds over time. The better you get at managing space, soil, timing, and crop selection, the more food your garden produces from the exact same footprint. If any of this changed how you think about small space gardening, if you're tired of working harder every year without seeing bigger harvests, or if you want to get more food from the space you already have, I'd really encourage you to check out some of the other garden workshop videos. If you want more deep dives into high-yield gardening systems, traditional growing wisdom, productivity-focused garden design, and proven strategies for maximizing harvests from small spaces, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I publish new garden workshop videos every week. Here's what I want to know from you. In the comments below, tell me this. What's the biggest thing limiting your harvest right now? Is it lack of space, poor soil, pests, plant selection, or simply not getting enough production from the space you already have? I read every single comment, and your answers often inspire future videos. If this video changed how you think about your garden, remember this: the Amish secret isn't really a secret at all. It's a commitment to treating every square foot, every planting decision, and every season as part of a larger system. When you stop asking, how can I build a bigger garden? And start asking, how can I make this space more productive? Everything begins to change. And if you found this valuable, share it with someone who wants to grow more food but thinks they don't have enough space. Thanks for spending time with me today. I'll see you in the next garden workshop.